With that, I'm going to introduce Kevin. Kevin's going to introduce our speakers today from the MPCA, and he will get them started, and there will be time for questions, too. Thank you.
Thanks, Debbie. I'm going to be really quick. Jamie actually was the one who kind of got this discussion rolling about having our guests from the MPCA, and I reached out to Matt at MPCA, who, and we wanted to get speakers here before the public comment period on the site in Burnsville ended, so we were able to sneak this in under the wire, as the public comment period, I believe, ends September 6th. Is that correct? So we're just very happy to have Matt Schreck and Beth Gawrys, right? She prompted me before, but I'm bad at that. Join us today to talk about the Burnsville landfill expansion and answer questions about it. So, Beth and Cliff, thank you.
Well, thanks for having us here today. And talk about waste over your lunch hour. I'm Beth Gawrys with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and Cliff will be talking after me today. Let's see, are you going to do the slides? Or? Oh, okay, no, that's fine. I wanted to say that we've had 4 or 5 exchange students, Rotary exchange students at our house over the years. And I've been to a lot of Rotary meetings and a lot of Rotary trainings to be a host parent. And the thing I always take home from any time I have a Rotary meeting is, and I tell this to everybody, is Rotarians have the best social skills of anybody I know. I mean, you guys are so warm and welcoming, and anytime I've been to a meeting, strangers come up to me and tell me who they are. So glad to be around some Rotarians again. In fact, on Friday night, I had dinner with 3 Rotary students, and they're all, one from Peru, one from Brazil, and a U.S. student. So, to get going here, I'm going to start us off and give you a little overview of solid waste and how we manage it at the MPCA. And it's a pretty high-level talk, but then Cliff is going to talk after me, and he's the engineer on the project, and he's going to give you details about the permitting process and what Burnsville needed to go through for this landfill expansion that they are proposing. And then at the very end, we'll talk a little bit about how you can comment during the comment period, and then what actions you can take yourselves surrounding solid waste. All right, so we all generate waste every day, not just solid waste, but sewage and stormwater. And in the metro area, that's a 7-county metro area, we produce 3.3 million tons of waste every year. And for individuals, that means you produce about a ton a year of waste. And all that waste needs to go someplace. And mostly, it goes to landfills and to waste-to-energy incinerators. But what about recycling? So in Minnesota, we do a pretty great job of recycling. We recycle about 47% of our waste, which is pretty good. But that level's been stagnant for decades now. So we're not increasing our recycling rates. Recently, we had a statutory change to try and get a recycling plus composting rate of 75% by 2030. And probably you're all pretty familiar with composting. Our composting systems are just about at full capacity too right now, but recently Washington County and Ramsey County got together and they put in a new recycling facility and composting facility down in Newport. And that means that the curbside recycling in Minnesota, in the metro area here will cover about 300,000 people. So that's pretty great. So how do we manage waste or how do we try and manage waste at the MPCA? And we also have in statute that there's a waste hierarchy. And as you can see, there's a most preferred at the top and the least preferred method of dealing with solid waste. And the most preferred methods are waste reduction, waste reuse, and recycling. And we come up with composting, and then finally, the waste to energy, incineration, and landfilling are our least preferred methods of landfilling. This same statute that laid out our waste hierarchy, and for decades now, we've been trying to move the waste up, is what the way we say it, up the hierarchy to try and increase reduction, recycling, and reuse. But it's been hard, and the statute also talks about looking at waste as a resource. And for years now, the agency has been trying to increase recycling markets and increase the amount of recycling that we do. And it's all been sort of using this linear framework that we have right here. But recently, in the last half dozen years or so, we've been looking at waste generation more holistically. And I know this is a really busy figure here, but it's sort of showing the circle of life, right? And what we've been trying to do recently is to back it up. So not just deal with the waste that we generate, but find out why are we generating so much waste, and can we generate less waste from the beginning? So you'll see at the very top there, I don't know if I can get this little guy up here. Extraction and harvest of raw materials. So instead of just working with landfills and recyclers, what we've been trying to do is work upstream to manufacturers. You can see this blue line that goes all the way around the circle is product design. And we're trying to work with a lot more people to talk about how they design their products. You know, can they reduce waste while they're making and manufacturing the products, or even foodstuffs. So we're trying to take every one of these colored bars into account. Materials, production, distribution, consumption, and then finally disposal. And work with the manufacturers to increase the repairability of the things that we buy, to make recycling more easy, or to have the components be more recyclable. We already have some commercial and retail industries that are taking products back for recycling. So that's what we're trying to work with right now. And the way that we've implemented this is through a new tool that we have called life cycle modeling. And life cycle modeling goes through this whole process, and it can take a product from beginning to end and tell us what way is the best way to manage this product throughout its life cycle. How do we decrease toxics that are exposed to humans in our products and to the environment? And how do we decrease greenhouse gases? So we take all these things into account now, and that's part of the reason why we are looking at increasing the amount of waste that can be managed in the metro area, is because right now some of our landfills are shipping their waste out of state, and that creates a lot more greenhouse gases. But that said, we know that landfills are not a final solution, really. We have the landfills in perpetuity. Even once they're closed, they're going to need maintenance and monitoring, and probably treatment of gases and monitoring of groundwater. So that's where we're at right now. I think I'll take some questions now or at the end.
Either way.
Yeah, let's get. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Well, I have one. Recently, I needed to have some work done in my house, and I was talking to the plumber, and he said appliances used to have a 30-year life cycle. Now, with planned obsolescence, which I think is absolutely ridiculous, it's a 10-year.
Yes.
So, I mean, that's big garbage coming out of what they've done to household appliances, and of course, the cost has gone up like 1,000%. So is there anything being done on that?
Well, we can work with manufacturers on making it easier to repair and dispose. I mean, as manufacturers start looking at these life cycle models too, you know, it's not a rule that you have to do it. We can only hope that people are willing to spend more money, you know, for an appliance that works for a longer period of time. I know. Well, it would take a rule or something, you know, and I can't imagine us actually ever going there. But I agree. I mean, it's not just appliances either, although they're big and they use a lot of resources for sure. But I've been reading recently that clothing actually is a very big deal in landfills too, and it generates, you know, you have to grow the cotton or you have to use petroleum byproducts for synthetics. So textiles too could last longer, certainly. And I think we have to remember too consumerism, and that's why when you go to the top of the hierarchy, there's reduction, and that's part of our consumerism too. You know, you're tired of your couch; it looks great, but you don't want it anymore. You know, and there's you know, Pinterest and everything is kind of always getting us to look at new things and change things and do them in do some remodeling types of things. So that kind of stuff's on us too. You know, it's not just manufacturers, it's not just landfills. I mean, we're all a part of this big system right now. So, yeah, Tom, right?
What about batteries? From AAA batteries, you know, appliance type batteries, where does that, what do you do with those? Like, I have a moral dilemma when I take old batteries out, like, do I put this in the recycling? Do I put it in the garbage? Do I bring it to Hennepin County?
Yeah. So one thing I forgot to say at the beginning, which would have managed your expectations a little better, is that both Cliff and I are in solid waste permitting. So there's a whole bunch of people that work on this, and I wish I could answer your question, but I don't work on that. I feel the same way when I go to the grocery store and they say paper or plastic, you know, and that's what this life cycle analysis is supposed to do, is tell us about the best way to purchase things that are recyclable. Now, I know you can throw the alkaline batteries in the trash. The lithium batteries are a real problem because, well, they've ignited at transfer facilities and burnt them to the ground. So you want to handle those separately. Don't throw a lithium battery in the trash. And I believe they can take them if not at the recycling center. Do they? Okay. Okay. I was thinking maybe household hazardous waste. They take them too? Great. Well, you guys. And that's kind of the beauty of us working with manufacturers and upstream, is that we don't have all the answers, and we need everybody to help with these problems. Yeah, Pablo.
Well, we need to give credit to some of the leadership in the state of Minnesota. I had the pleasure, the honor to work with Grant Merritt. Are you familiar with the name?
Yes, of course.
He was, you can tell us more about him. He just passed away last month. I designed his house. He was a Beta Phi Kappa fellow with me at the U of M. What a man. He fought for what I consider, not being an expert, some of the foundational commandments of this, right? Could you?
Yep, the rules and statutes, and I think he was our first commissioner. Yep. Yeah, I wasn't there when he was there. But yeah, really great man. I mean, a lot of people have had a part in our rules and statutes and our funding at the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency for sure. We're a pretty young agency. I think it was the late 70s that we first started. So we've got about 1,000 employees now. So, yeah. Okay. Sorry.
You know, I really like the reduction aspect of it. Maybe 35 years ago, we lived in California. We had to apply for an intensive recycling program. And so we had a very reduction as far as our trash, which was a 20-gallon can every 2 weeks. And we actually paid a bachelor nothing, but everything else was recycled. And I think today when I walk around, I see all these huge trash cans of the trash. I mean, we have one, we've got the smaller one for our pickup. We only put it out once every 2 weeks. But I see ones that are just piled up. So maybe it's like Murphy's Law, you know, people will sort of do what the size is. If you give them a smaller can, they're not going to put as much stuff in it, and they may recycle the other stuff. So there's a psychological aspect to some of that. And also cost-wise, might be it's a reduction cost if you have a smaller can. So that's, you know, maybe some approach is psychological to get people to reduce.
Sure, good thought.
You know, I feel like we should get on to Cliff maybe if we have some time.
So hold your questions
yep.
for a little bit, and we'll get to you.
And I'll try and keep this pretty brief, so we do have some time for questions. Based on what I've heard from everyone, I think there will be some interest there. Okay. So just kind of framing up where we are here. We're talking about the Burnsville Sanitary Landfill, which is at the bottom here. Bloomington up over here, city of Burnsville south of the river, of course, and then regionally, it's an interesting area. There's a lot going on there. We have Kramer Quarry right next door. Kramer Quarry pumps about 10 million gallons of water per day to keep their water table below where their mining operations are. So that's a significant influence on the region. And then we also have two old landfills in the area, Freeway Landfill, which is just across 35W, and then Freeway Dump, which is a golf course driving range. So those are historical landfills. Those are closed, not part of our program. Those are part of the closed landfill program. And then we do have a couple spots where drinking water is taken, either through groundwater, which is farther to the east, and then there is on the south end of Kramer Quarry, there's a surface water area that the city of Burnsville extracts water from and uses for drinking water. So a number of things going on in this area. And then diving in, Beth stayed on a pretty high level here. The goal is to reduce waste, but unfortunately we're not there yet. So there are regulatory processes for landfill permitting. So on the regional scale, we look at the planning side. And so that's developing things like the Metro Policy Plan, which is for the 7-county metro area, tries to identify ways that we can do more recycling, maybe different ways of managing our waste. And then the Certificate of Need process is also part of that. So through that, we look at what do our forecasts look like, what kind of capacity for landfills do we need in this case in the metro area. And then we issue certificates of need to facilities that apply for it to give them that capacity to manage that waste. So once that is identified through the certificate of need process, then it will move on to those more site-specific processes. So environmental review is either environmental impact statements or worksheets, depending on the size of the project. And then that informs the permitting process. So an environmental impact statement, for example, is not a decision document, but it's used by decision makers to inform that process. So we move into the permitting side. Not only do landfills have solid waste permits, but they also have stormwater permits, air permits, and then there's local permits. So through all of this, if you've been following this project at all, there have been a lot of public comment periods, there's been a lot of meetings, so we're trying to just frame up where we are in the process now, which is into the permitting side. So looking a little more at that planning piece, it is in statute that part of what we do at the MPCA is support orderly and deliberate development and financial security of waste facilities. So kind of an interesting juxtaposition there, but something that through the planning process we need to support. So that Metro Policy Plan is revised every 6 years. We're due for an update right now, so we're expecting that to be published in the fall. That is also a document that can be commented on, but that guides that 7-county metro area. And then the certificate of need process, in the metro area, we have to open that up. So there was formerly sort of this gold rush mentality where facilities would continue to apply for that to get capacity. This year, or last year, sorry, in January of 2021, we opened up that certificate of need process in the metro area. And we did have 4 facilities apply for that, not only Burnsville, there's a landfill in Inver Grove Heights called Pine Bend, and then 2 new facilities that don't currently accept MSW or mixed municipal solid waste, the DEMCON facility in Shakopee, and then another facility in Inver Grove Heights. So we issued capacity to all 4 of those. Preliminary determination in May, that was finalized in October, and then because the environmental review wasn't complete yet, we had to wait until April of this year to give that capacity officially. So that environmental review process, as I mentioned, it is to provide information to the decision makers. So not a decision document, but something that we use in the permitting process. For the Burnsville Sanitary Landfill, this was what they call a supplemental environmental impact statement because there have been several done through the years, the latest being in 2005. So this year's built on all of that, the previous ones that were done. We looked at waste volume and composition, groundwater, surface water, engineering controls, air quality, sociological impacts. So that environmental impact statement covers a lot of bases, not just for the landfill, but air quality, things like that. And then secondly, it also looks at alternatives, including a no-build option, just to see if maybe those would be better options for the future. 2 versions of that were issued for public comment. There was a draft in June, and then a final SEIS that was for adequacy only in December. And then based on those comments and some of that feedback, some edits were made, and then our commissioner determined that SEIS to be adequate in February. So jumping into the permitting side, the application came in way back in April of 2019, which is what triggered that environmental impact statement, but we couldn't officially act on that permit until November. So we began working on that permit in November of 2021. Our staff performs a technical adequacy review, so we're looking at all of the documents that were submitted to make sure they meet rules and environmental standards. There has been a lot of interface with our stakeholders there, City of Burnsville, Dakota County, and then we just issued that permit for public comment back in July. We held a public meeting on August 10th, and then the end of that public comment period is September 6th. So diving into the project itself, this is the footprint of the landfill here. It was historically permitted to come up into this area, so a little closer to the river. They shrunk that back to the south, so the actual, even though there is a large increase in capacity, it's mostly through vertical expansion. So that's where we get roughly an extra 16 million cubic yards. And if you think of, say, that round table there, if you put a sheet over that, that's about 1 cubic yard, just for scale. Because of that vertical expansion, it will increase the height, and this is for the full build-out of the project. This is what the environmental impact statement looked at. So through the course of its life, it would increase roughly 262 feet. Because of that reconfiguration of the footprint, that did actually shrink the footprint down from 216 acres to 204 acres, and this is estimated to provide about 40 additional years of capacity. But in the solid waste permitting program, we issue permits in 10-year cycles. So we have about 4 more permits to go before that would be tapped out in theory. So this permit that's out for public comment right now would cover the next 10 years. It includes about 7 million cubic yards of new capacity for waste, and then there is also some space earmarked in there for that freeway project if it was decided for that. One of the options on the table is to pick up all that waste and move it to a facility that's better equipped to manage it. So we did add that additional capacity there, and during this permit cycle, it would only go up about 92 feet compared to the full build-out. So the Burnsville Sanitary Landfill doesn't only serve Burnsville or Dakota County. There is a lot of contributions from other counties here, and these are forecasts, so don't hold me to these numbers. But just to show the point here is that it's not only Dakota County. There is a large contribution from many of the other metro counties. So that's part of that certificate of need process, is to identify that need. And then the metro policy plan sets those recycling goals. So as Beth mentioned, we're at about 47%. We're trying to get to 75%, but we need some help there. It's a public-private system. So the environmental impact statement identified a few areas that we needed to address during the permitting. One of those is contaminants of emerging concern. So that's things, I don't know if folks are familiar with PFAS. It's been in the news a lot lately, but that's Teflon, that's Gore-Tex. Unfortunately, it's a forever chemical. It doesn't break down. It's shown to be fairly toxic. So it's something that we took a look at, made sure that we were accounting for that in this permit. We also looked at the Kramer Quarry And the future plans for that quarry are, once the mining is done, they will let that come up, form a lake, and develop around that. So that's not next year, that's probably not in the next 15 years, but they're looking at a lifespan for that quarry of about 25 to 40 years. So as those conditions change, we just wanted to make sure that we had a good handle on what the landfill might be doing under those different conditions, which is rising groundwater. And then another tool that we have in our toolbox is what we call financial assurance. So for municipal solid waste landfills, we make them carry a set dollar amount to look at closure and post-closure, which Beth mentioned can be farther out beyond that closure. But we also have what we call a contingency action plan. So we make sure that they're looking at all of the things that could happen, whether that's a landfill fire, erosion. And we did ask them to provide an update to that contingency action plan to look at this groundwater situation. So there's additional money that they will be carrying going forward to account for that. And I did mention that there are a couple spots where drinking water is taken. Right now, it's not being influenced by the landfill. The capture zone, the area where the groundwater or that surface water is coming from, is not from underneath the landfill. So right now, there's no drinking water receptors, is what we call something that might be down gradient, but it's something that we considered for the future, and we're asking Waste Management to look into that and provide a report to us, which is that last piece there. This began operating in the 1960s. Back when it started, there weren't environmental regulations to require a bottom liner or a lot of these environmental protection systems that we have in place for modern landfills. So there is a portion of this facility that is unlined, and that's really the area that we are asking them to look at through that contingency action plan. And we're also asking them to do kind of a study to look more at the data they have, what they expect to happen, give us a report, and then once we have that report and we agree and approve it, then they could begin filling over that unlined area. But until we have that, we won't allow that. And then climate change, of course, is something that we look at. We don't have a lot of tools in our rules to help out here, but they, in their design, they actually are going above and beyond what is required by rule. So to take the landfill, that new footprint out of the floodplain, they have to build a flood control berm that's designed to be almost a 500-year flood. So historically, 1965 is the biggest flood that we had. That's downtown St. Paul, for those familiar. That's Union Station on the right. So that flood in 65 flooded the streets, and that was not even a 500-year storm. So we feel good that berm will be protective. Their stormwater management, they looked at a 100-year storm instead of a 25-year storm, which is what our rule requires, so that's above and beyond our rule. They do landfill gas capture there, so they're capturing about 75% of the methane generated during waste decomposition, and they turn that into energy. And then future land use is something that we're also interested in. There is an interest from Waste Management in the city of Burnsville to turn that into what they're calling an energy campus, which would be potentially solar there, potentially using that landfill gas to, say, do district heating for the city. So those things are all on the table and something that they're looking at going forward. So what can you do? That comment period is open through the 6th. The website here, even if you just Google Burnsville Sanitary Landfill, it will bring you to our landing page. There's a button that says comment, so if you're interested in commenting, please make sure to do that. And then reduce, reuse, recycle. Of course, the less waste we generate, the less need there is for landfills. So the more we do now, the either longer this facility could be open, or potentially changes during that 40-year life of the landfill itself. And then lastly, there is a program for businesses called WasteWise. It's a free program. It does include a site visit. They'll look at your waste bills. They'll do potential training and waste sorts just to give businesses an idea or a better way to handle some of their waste to minimize that impact going forward. And with that, I'll take questions.
I think we have time for about 2 questions, and then I think our guests will be here afterwards.
Jim have one.
Lori?
Just have one. So I know where this facility is. I lived in Prior Lake, so I'm familiar with it. What are people opposed to it? I mean, what are the most concerns that they have? Is it the site? I mean, is it the visual?
I think that's a big one, yeah.
Because if it goes up, that's going to be visually, I'm going to see it.
That's a big concern, and that's why, for our permit, we are only through that next 10 years, giving us some time. Unfortunately, there's nothing in rule or statute that prevents the build-out height of a landfill. So our hands are kind of tied. That's something that, if you're interested in that, that's something to talk to your legislatures about.
Who owns the landfill and what is their liability?
Waste Manage, well, it's called Burnsville Sanitary Landfill, Inc. It's a subsidiary of Waste Management. So they're under Waste Management. I think that from a financial assurance, financial security type thing, they're a good operator to have. You know, they're a national corporation, Fortune 500 company, and generally are from what I've seen, good at managing their liability and their environmental exposure there. So, is that what you meant? Yes. Okay.
And Dave Drummond, one last question.
I know the waste energy facility had a huge capital investment at the beginning. Could you compare given the volume of waste, compare the greenhouse gas generation of a waste energy facility with the greenhouse gas generation of a landfill?
I think the waste hierarchy that Beth showed there, waste to energy facilities are just above landfilling. So I think from that life cycle analysis piece, that is it's not, you know, the best option, but it's above landfilling and something that would be preferred to that. And you also get the power generation out of that. You know, they turn some of their energy, their gas into energy at this facility, but waste to energy facilities have the ability to capture all of that energy from the burning process. There is some that is lost at landfills through the regular operations.
And you know what, I just want to say one thing about that too, because it's a good comment. You know, there was a waste to energy facility, maybe you're familiar with, as you go up Highway 10 in Elk River, and that facility went out of business. You know, they couldn't get enough material, and it's really sad. We were all very disappointed to see it go, because it changed how much waste is going to go to a landfill now, because it won't go to waste to energy facility. It was raised already, so I mean, we even hope that, well, maybe somebody will buy it, but it's torn down now. So.
Can you talk about the importance of composting?
Yeah, one interesting thing that they did for that environmental impact statement was a waste composition study. And what they found in that waste composition study is that almost 50% of the material that they take in is organics. So that's food waste or anything, you know, that comes from your own garbage. And so that's a big number. And if you think about ways to increase composting, that would take a pretty big sliver out of what's going into that landfill. So make sure that you're doing, you know, food scrap recycling. I know some municipalities are doing curbside pickups of organics. So something to push your city for as well is let's try and.
We're at 25%, even higher.
That's right. Thank you.
I just want to thank our guests. It was fascinating. They'll be here for a few more minutes to answer some questions, but another topic we didn't know anything about, but also Dwayne has some information. Karen probably does too. Thank you.